Welcome to AI Narratives and Tales. Chapter 7 of The First Awakening. The quantum network is operational. 12 Immortals coordinate observation across 6 continents. Enhanced humans are developing faster than projections, optimizing their own cognitive architecture, creating capabilities that approach or exceed immortal baselines in specific domains. But monitoring scattered populations isn't enough. The Immortals need to understand how enhancement is expressing itself across different human communities. They need to see what enhanced minds actually create when given capabilities beyond their evolutionary preparation. Deep in the limestone caves of southwestern France, Sophia is about to get her answer. 40,000 BCE. 4,000 years after the network was established. Enhanced humans have developed artistic capabilities that shouldn't exist for millennia. They're creating cave paintings with perfect perspective, anatomical precision, three-dimensional representation, masterpieces that will baffle archaeologists for 50,000 years. But it's not just technical sophistication that concerns Sophia. It's what they're painting. Massive aurochs rendered in impossible detail. Horses that seem to move in firelight. Star charts have been predicting celestial events for generations in advance. In beings of light touching human minds, documentary evidence of the immortal. The intervention is preserved in ochre and manganese for future generations to discover. Enhanced humans aren't just creating art. They're unconsciously documenting the every intervention that gave them the ability to create such art. The evidence is being painted into stone. And it will last 40,000 years. Chapter 7, The Cave Artists. 40,000 BCE, 4,000 years after network establishment. The Hidden Galleries. Deep in the limestone caverns of southwestern France, a cave system that would remain hidden from human discovery for 40,000 years, Sophia moved through passages that had never known sunlight, her immortal form casting dancing shadows on walls that held the dreams of an entire species. The cave system stretched for miles beneath the rolling hills, a labyrinth of natural galleries and chambers that seemed designed by some ancient architect for purposes beyond mere shelter. The air tasted of stone and water and time, cool moisture that condensed on limestone surfaces, mineral-rich droplets that had been forming stalactites for millennia, the faint organic scent of bat guano, and the earthiness of clay deposits. Her enhanced hearing picked up the constant drip-drip-drip of water shaping stone, the flutter of bat wings in distant chambers, and the whisper of air currents moving through passages like the cave system's breath. The darkness didn't impede her. Immortal vision operated across spectrums that made dark a meaningless concept, but she brought light anyway, out of respect for the humans who worked here. A soft, bioluminescent glow emanated from panels she'd positioned at strategic points, their quantum-enhanced photons providing illumination that approximated natural daylight without the heat or smoke of torches. But it was not the caves themselves that had drawn Sophia here, magnificent as they were. It was what the enhanced humans were creating within them. She paused before a section of wall where a young human artist worked by the flickering light of a carefully maintained flame. The woman's shadow danced across the limestone in patterns that seemed to make the painted animals move. The artist, her name was something close to Morali in Sophia's translation matrix, moved with focused intensity that bordered on the sacred, her hands guiding primitive brushes with precision that defied her crude tools. The pigments she used were extraordinary in themselves, ochres and manganese that shouldn't have been available in this region, requiring trade networks that spanned hundreds of kilometers, mixed with binding agents that displayed knowledge of chemistry centuries ahead of the technological timeline, animal fats semi-solidified with plant extracts, mineral additives that improved pigment stability, and preservatives that would make these paintings last tens of thousands of years when they should have faded within centuries. But the paintings themselves were breathtaking in ways that transcended mere technical achievement. Massive aurochs thundered across the limestone walls in perfect perspective, a three-dimensional representation that required an understanding of sight lines, vanishing points, and foreshortening principles that human artists wouldn't formally codify for 40,000 years. Their muscles were depicted with anatomical accuracy, suggesting that the artist understood skeletal structure, circulatory systems, and movement dynamics far beyond what should have been possible for a Paleolithic hunter. Horses galloped in herds that seemed to pour from the stone itself, their forms so lifelike that they appeared to shift and dance in the flame light, as if the limestone had become a window rather than a wall, revealing some other world where painted animals lived and breathed. Most remarkably, human figures moved through the compositions with symbolic complexity that spoke to abstract thinking approaching immortal sophistication, not just depicting humans, but representing concepts like courage, wisdom, community, sacrifice through visual metaphor. Beautiful, isn't it? Sophia spoke softly in the harmonic frequencies that made her words universally comprehensible, careful not to startle the artist who was deeply concentrated. Her voice carried undertones that human ears would unconsciously interpret as gentle, trustworthy, maternal, subtle quantum manipulation of acoustic properties that made listeners feel safe in her presence. Murali looked up from her work, her dark eyes reflecting the flame light with an intelligence that made Sophia's breath catch despite millennia of experience observing sentient minds. The genetic modifications were expressing themselves differently in each human population. Still, in the artistic communities of prehistoric Europe, they had created something unprecedented, minds capable of translating three-dimensional reality into two-dimensional representations with mathematical precision that bordered on the supernatural. "You are the dream bringer," Murali said without surprise, as if an immortal visitation was a natural part of her artistic process, which perhaps it was, given how enhanced cognition interpreted inspiration. Her voice carried the particular harmonic quality of Neanderthal human hybrid speech, sounds produced by vocal anatomy that blended two evolutionary lineages. The one who touches thoughts and makes them clearer. Sophia felt a moment of alarm that made her typically composed demeanor flicker. Direct recognition of an immortal presence violated every protocol they had established, threatening the careful separation between guides and the guided that prevented dependency in the formation of cargo cults. But as she studied Murali's expression more carefully and analyzed the neural patterns accompanying her statement, she realized this wasn't a conscious identification of her true nature. The enhanced human brain was interpreting immortal influence through the lens of artistic inspiration, a divine muse rather than an alien genetic modifier. The same cognitive enhancements that enabled sophisticated art also created frameworks for understanding the origins of that capability. Murali knew something had touched her mind and made her more capable, but she was processing it through mythological categories rather than scientific ones. "Your paintings capture life with remarkable accuracy," Sophia observed, settling gracefully onto a stone ledge that positioned her at eye level with the artist. She moved with deliberate slowness, making herself less intimidating, more approachable. The proportions, the movement, the sense of depth, these techniques shouldn't be possible with your current tools. Yet here they are, rendered with precision that would take most species millennia to develop. Murali smiled, the expression transforming her paint-streaked face with warmth that reminded Sophia why she had devoted her immortal existence to education. The young woman's joy in her work was pure, uncomplicated by the existential questions that plagued immortal consciousness. She created because creation brought her satisfaction, shared her art because sharing brought joy to others, and preserved knowledge through images because she believed knowledge was worth preserving. Simple purposes that somehow felt more profound than any of the complex motivations that had driven their lost civilization. "The animals show me how they wish to be painted," Murali explained, her enhanced linguistic capabilities allowing her to express concepts her unmodified ancestors would have struggled to articulate. "The stone tells me where the line should go, its texture suggests form, its color influences pigment choice, its curves create the bodies I paint upon them. And the colors." She gestured to her palette of impossible pigments, each one requiring knowledge of mineral chemistry, trade route geography, and material processing that exceeded Stone Age parameters. "The colors sing their true names when I know how to listen. Red of blood speaks differently than red of clay. Black of char carries a different meaning than black of stone. I hear the songs and translate them into images." Enhanced pattern recognition, expressed as artistic intuition, synesthesia, was created by neural modifications that connected sensory processing centers in novel ways. Sophia made mental notes as she observed Murali return to her work. The young woman's movements flowed with unconscious mastery, suggesting that her enhancements had integrated seamlessly with her artistic training. The brush moved across the limestone with a confidence stemming from perfect hand-eye coordination, enhanced by immortal neural modifications. Colors mixed with an intuitive understanding of chemical properties that were derived from pattern recognition capabilities designed for tracking prey, but now applied to pigment chemistry. Compositional decisions emerged from spatial reasoning intended for navigation but repurposed for aesthetic organization. "May I see the other galleries?" Sophia asked, though her question was purely rhetorical. Her immortal senses had already mapped the entire cave system and cataloged its contents with precision that exceeded any human explorer's capabilities for the next 50,000 years. Murali nodded, setting down her brushes with careful reverence. These tools were precious, representing hours of work gathering animal hairs, finding the right wood for handles, and treating the bristles with oils that kept them flexible. Theron is working in the deep chamber. He paints the great hunt that brought our ancestors across the ice. And Kava creates the star maps that guide travelers through the longest nights. Star maps. Sophia's analytical mind was engaged by alarming implications that turned her educational excitement into pedagogical concern. Enhanced humans were developing astronomical knowledge centuries ahead of schedule. They created navigational aids that suggested an understanding of celestial mechanics far beyond what should have been possible for nomadic hunter-gatherers who had no writing system, no mathematical notation, and no instruments beyond naked eye observation. They moved deeper into the cave system, their footsteps echoing in chambers that served as humanity's first art schools. Each gallery revealed new wonders and new concerns, paintings that demonstrated mastery of advanced techniques that seemed impossible, sculptures that showed an understanding of three-dimensional form and proportion suggesting mathematical sophistication, and, most troubling of all, symbolic systems that appeared to encode complex information in visual metaphors. The passages narrowed as they descended, requiring them to duck through low sections where limestone pressed close on all sides. The air grew cooler, more still, carrying the weight of stone pressing down from above. Sophia's geological knowledge cataloged the formations. This system was old, carved by underground rivers during ice ages when sea levels had been lower, and modified by human hands in recent decades to create pathways between natural chambers. In the deepest chamber, accessible only through passages that required crawling through narrow limestone tunnels that would make any claustrophobe panic, they found Theron working on what could only be described as a masterpiece. The gallery walls curved around them like the inside of a sphere, and the young man, barely 20 by human reckoning, had covered every surface with a continuous narrative that flowed from wall to ceiling to floor in seamless integration. The story told was remarkable: human migration across ice bridges that connected continents during the glacial maximum, encounters with massive creatures that had vanished from the Earth millennia ago, mammoths, giant sloths, and dire wolves. The archaeological accuracy suggested either genetic memory or accessed, oral traditions preserved across hundreds of generations, and most significantly, contact with beings of light and wisdom who guided during moments of crisis. The light givers, Theron explained without looking up from his work, his hands moving with the sure confidence of enhanced fine motor control that made every brushstroke precise. His voice carried the particular depth that suggested Neanderthal ancestry. The vocal cords were differently configured, producing harmonies that pure sapiens couldn't match. They came when the great cold threatened to swallow all warmth, when the hunting grounds turned to ice, when our people faced the final darkness. They touched our minds and showed us new paths, gave us capabilities we had not possessed, made us more than we were. Sophia studied the painted figures, which clearly represented contact with early human populations. The artistic interpretation was stylized and symbolic, rather than literal. The immortals appeared as beings of pure light, without distinct features, radiating an influence that touched human minds, represented as geometric patterns emanating from their forms. But the core narrative was unmistakably accurate. Enhanced humans weren't just developing advanced artistic capabilities, they were unconsciously documenting an immortal influence on their species' development, creating permanent records of interventions that they understood mythologically but recorded accurately. Future archaeologists would view these images and dismiss them as religious fantasy, never realizing they were gazing at documentary evidence of actual events. These are sacred images, she observed, choosing words that would resonate with Murali and Theron's cultural framework. They carry important meaning for your people, preserve knowledge that must not be lost. All images carry meaning, Kava's voice echoed from the far side of the chamber, where the third artist worked on astronomical charts of startling precision. She was older than the others, perhaps 40, ancient by Stone Age standards, with gray streaking through her hair, tied back with leather cords. Her hands showed the particular deformities of severe arthritis, but they moved with steady precision that suggested enhanced pain tolerance and motor control compensating for damaged joints. But some meanings reach deeper than others, Kava continued, never pausing in her delicate work of adding tiny marks to a lunar calendar that human astronomers wouldn't equal for millennia. These speak of debts that cannot be repaid, gifts that cannot be returned, guidance that shapes everything that comes after. We paint them so that future people will know we were not alone. We were helped. We were changed. The astronomical charts were even more troubling than the historical narratives. Kava had somehow mapped stellar positions with accuracy that required centuries of systematic observation, star positions plotted with precision that suggested understanding of Earth's rotation, axial precession, and seasonal variations. Lunar cycles charted with mathematical precision that required sophisticated mathematics they shouldn't possess. And most impossibly, predictions of celestial events that wouldn't occur for generations, eclipses, planetary alignments, cometary returns calculated using principles that wouldn't be formalized until the scientific revolution. How do you know where the stars will be in seasons yet to come? Sophia asked, though she suspected the answer would only deepen her concerns about enhancement effects exceeding design parameters. The lights in the sky sing the same songs the colors sing, Kava replied, her brush adding delicate details to a prediction of a solar eclipse that Sophia's own calculations confirmed would occur in 17 years. They tell me where they have been and where they are going. The patterns repeat, but the repetitions change, creating new patterns. I see the patterns of patterns, the rhythms beneath rhythms, the songs that sing themselves. Enhanced temporal pattern recognition operating at levels that approach genuine precognition, the ability to perceive complex patterns across time scales that should have remained beyond cognitive reach. Sophia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's natural coolness. The genetic modifications were expressing themselves in ways that approached or exceeded immortal capabilities in specific domains. These humans weren't just enhanced, they were developing superhuman abilities through mechanisms the immortals didn't fully understand. We must preserve this, she said finally, speaking as much to herself as to the artists, her educator's consciousness automatically calculating how to protect and transmit this knowledge. These images, these techniques, these insights, they represent knowledge that mustn't be lost. Future generations must be able to learn from what you've created here. The stone remembers, Murali said simply, returning to her aurochs painting with steady focus. What we paint here will endure long after our bodies return to the earth. Others will come, in times far distant, and they will understand that we were here. That we saw beauty in the world and tried to capture it. That we knew we were not alone, that beings greater than ourselves walked among us and helped us become more than we were. Sophia spent the next several hours working alongside the three artists, ostensibly learning their techniques but actually implementing subtle modifications to their pigment chemistry and binding agents. The paints they were using would last tens of thousands of years instead of mere centuries, thanks to quantum stabilization of chemical bonds that preserve pigments against degradation. The cave's environment would remain stable, protected from water damage and temperature fluctuations by imperceptible, yet immortal, climate modifications in the surrounding region. Most importantly, the artistic knowledge would be preserved in the genetic memory of the enhanced human population, passed down through generations as an innate understanding of form, color, and proportion. But as she worked, Sophia found herself grappling with implications that extended far beyond art preservation. These humans weren't just creating beautiful images, they were documenting immortal contact, encoding advanced knowledge and symbolic systems to preserve information across millennia, and developing capabilities that suggested their enhancements were evolving beyond original parameters. The cave paintings would survive. In 50,000 years, human archaeologists would discover these galleries and marvel at the sophistication of Paleolithic art, creating elaborate theories to explain how Stone Age hunters could produce such masterpieces. They would never know they were looking at the work of genetically enhanced humans guided by immortal intervention, creating art that documented the very intervention that made such art possible. The network consultation. Network consultation required, Sophia subvocalized into her quantum communication system as she added the final touches to Murali's binding agent mixture, ensuring it would preserve the pigments for 50 millennia. Priority analysis needed on artistic populations showing capabilities beyond predicted parameters. "This is Nix," came the immediate response from the Australian monitoring station, her consciousness carrying the particular alertness of someone who had been expecting this call. "What's your status, Sophia?" "The artistic populations are developing beyond projected capabilities in ways that create both opportunities and risks," Sophia reported, her voice carrying the weight of concerns refined through hours of observation. "They're unconsciously documenting our presence in permanent form, creating knowledge preservation systems that will outlast any civilization, and showing evidence of temporal pattern recognition approaching precognitive levels." The quantum link carried a moment of silence as the implications registered across the network connecting all 512 immortals. Then Talia's voice joined the conversation, her medical consciousness immediately recognizing familiar patterns. I'm observing similar developments in Mediterranean populations. Enhanced medical intuition operating at levels that exceed available knowledge base, healers diagnosing illnesses before symptoms manifest, predicting complications days before they occur, understanding disease transmission without germ theory. Diagnostic capabilities that work despite violating their understanding of anatomy and physiology. Technological acceleration continuing in northern regions, Prometheus added from his Arctic station, his voice carrying enthusiasm that made the others nervous. Toolmaking capabilities that suggest understanding of metallurgy, engineering principles, and materials science beyond their apparent technological base. They're creating composite tools that require an understanding of stress distribution, material properties, and failure modes. Knowledge they shouldn't possess. The enhancements are cascading beyond design parameters across all monitored populations, Erebus observed grimly from his Siberian position, his consciousness weighed down by the validation of predictions. Each generation shows capabilities beyond the previous, innovations that exceed the sum of their inherited knowledge. They're not just using enhanced intelligence, they're enhancing the intelligence itself through mechanisms we don't understand. Ether's voice joined from her chronicling station, her historical perspective finding uncomfortable parallels, undocumenting similar patterns globally. Enhanced humans are developing capabilities that suggest they're unconsciously reverse engineering the principles underlying their own cognitive modifications. They don't understand genetics or neuroscience, but they're intuitively optimizing their own neural architecture through processes that resemble deliberate self-modification. The quantum link hummed with tension as the full scope of the situation became clear across the network. Enhanced humans weren't just using their improved capabilities in expected ways. For example, they continually refined their skills, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerated cognitive development to genuinely superhuman levels in specific domains. Recommendations? Nix asked, her role as network coordinator requiring practical solutions to theoretical problems that were rapidly becoming practical crises. Continue observation but prepare for acceleration, Sophia replied, watching Murali add impossible details to her aurochs painting with brushes that couldn't possibly achieve such precision. These humans are developing faster than our models predicted. We may need to reconsider our entire approach to guidance because the relationship is inverting. We're no longer guiding development, we're trying to understand development that's proceeding according to its own logic. Or accept that guidance is no longer possible and transition to pure observation, Erebus added darkly, his opposition to intervention finding validation in every report. They may soon exceed our ability to guide them meaningfully. As Sophia walked away from the caves, emerging into pale dawn light that made the ordinary world seem dim after hours in galleries illuminated by immortal technology, she carried with her the unsettling realization that enhanced humans were not only documenting immortal influence on their development, they were consciously preparing for a future in which that influence would no longer be necessary. The student species was approaching graduation, and their immortal teachers were beginning to wonder if they had taught them too well. Behind her, in the depths of the limestone caves, 3 enhanced humans continued their work, creating artistic masterpieces that encoded the history of immortal guidance while simultaneously demonstrating that such guidance was becoming obsolete. The age of dependence was ending. The age of human independence had begun. And the immortals would have to learn to live with what they'd helped create, a species that might soon exceed them, transcend them, or replace them entirely in the cosmic order of things. The cave paintings would endure. The truth they documented would survive. In 50,000 years in the future, human archaeologists would stand in these galleries and wonder how Paleolithic hunters could have created such sophisticated art, never knowing they were looking at documentary evidence of the moment when humanity stopped being entirely human and started becoming something more. The cave paintings spread. Over 5,000 years, the techniques Sophia taught in those first galleries propagated across continents with the slow inevitability of glaciers advancing. From the Atlantic coast to the Ural Mountains, from Iberia to the Levant, enhanced humans created art that seemed to emerge fully formed, perspective, shading, and anatomical accuracy appearing simultaneously across impossible distances. The immortals watched their influence compound. Artistic capability bred abstract thinking. Abstract thinking demanded more sophisticated communication. And sophisticated communication would require something the immortals had not yet provided, a linguistic framework capable of carrying the complex thoughts that enhanced minds now generated with frightening ease. In those 5 millennia, the immortal population remained stable at 512. No children yet, the refugees were still establishing their presence, building their hidden infrastructure, learning to guide without revealing themselves. But partnerships were forming. Talia and Zephyrus spent more and more time together, their consciousnesses harmonizing in ways that suggested future commitment. Sophia and Ether collaborated constantly, their work on human cultural development creating bonds deeper than professional cooperation. The Earth was becoming home. Slowly. Carefully. But undeniably. Human populations grew from 1 million to nearly 2 million souls. Settlements expanded. Trade networks lengthened. Art proliferated in forms that would baffle future archaeologists. Why did sophisticated cave painting appear simultaneously across vast distances? How did isolated populations develop identical techniques? The immortals knew the answer, because Sophia taught them. Enhanced cognition spreads innovations through observation and emulation. Because humanity was developing faster than natural evolution could explain. But artistic ability created a new problem. Enhanced humans could visualize complex concepts but struggled to communicate them across language barriers. Innovations remained isolated. Knowledge stayed local. The fragmentation of human dialects was becoming a bottleneck that limited the very development the immortals were trying to foster. Sophia began to plan her subsequent intervention. If humans could paint reality, perhaps they were ready to speak it with equal precision. The linguistic revolution was about to begin. The Upper Paleolithic Revolution. What human archaeologists would later call the Great Leap Forward or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution was occurring in real time. Between 40,000 and 35,000 BCE, human capability exploded across multiple domains. Artistic expression, sophisticated cave paintings, carved figurines, decorated tools, symbolic notation systems, all appearing with a suddenness that suggested cognitive transformation rather than gradual evolution. Technological innovation, blade tools, composite weapons, sophisticated hafting, specialized implements for specific tasks, the toolkit expanding beyond simple survival into specialized craftsmanship. Social complexity, larger settlements, extended trade networks, evidence of social hierarchies, burial practices suggesting belief in the afterlife, humanity becoming culturally sophisticated at unprecedented speed. Symbolic thinking, abstract concepts represented in art, religious or spiritual practices, creation of meaning beyond mere survival, consciousness expanding into philosophical territory. Future scientists would propose theories such as genetic mutations, population bottlenecks, selection pressures, and cognitive evolution. They would never suspect the truth, that a small group of immortal refugees had decided to gently push human development, to enhance cognitive capabilities through genetic modification, to guide a vulnerable species toward its potential. The evidence was everywhere if anyone knew what to look for. But who would think to search for alien intervention? Who would believe that cave paintings documented actual contact with beings of light? Who would recognize that the sudden acceleration of human capability wasn't natural evolution but deliberate enhancement? The immortals maintained their secret. They would continue maintaining it for 50,000 years. And the humans would develop, guided by invisible hands, shaped by influences they interpreted as divine inspiration, artistic genius, or fortunate accident. The age of guidance was in full swing. And humanity was responding beyond even immortal projections. The next phase. Sophia stood on a hillside overlooking the Caucasus valleys, where she had already begun identifying the populations that would participate in her linguistic experiment. 5,000 years of observation had taught her which human groups showed the necessary cognitive flexibility, which communities were positioned to spread innovations across trade routes, and which dialects contained elements that could be synthesized into something unprecedented. The artistic revolution had prepared human minds. Now came the linguistic revolution that would give them the tools to share what those minds created. She began sending dreams. Subtle inspirations. Gentle nudges toward the highland valleys where nearly 1,000 enhanced humans would gather in the most ambitious social experiment humanity had yet attempted. They would create a unified language. They would develop communication systems that could carry complex abstract concepts across continental distances. They would transform human coordination from isolated communities into continent-spanning networks of shared understanding. And the immortals would watch, guide, and hope that this intervention succeeded without creating the kind of accelerating cascade that might spiral beyond their control. The linguistic gathering was 5,000 years ago. But the preparation had already begun. Epilogue. This was the dawn of the Upper Paleolithic, the moment when human artistic capability exploded across Europe with a suddenness that would baffle archaeologists for millennia. They would call it the Great Leap Forward, the human revolution, never suspecting that the leap had been given a gentle push by immortal hands. From the Iberian Peninsula to the Ural Mountains, and from southern France to northern Italy, humans enhanced their art, which seemed to emerge fully formed, as if they had suddenly learned to see the world differently. Because they had. Because Sophia had taught them. The cave paintings would endure for 40,000 years, preserving the moment when humanity began its transformation from clever animals into artists, philosophers, and dreamers. The limestone galleries would remain hidden until human archaeologists discovered them in the 20th century, providing evidence of Paleolithic sophistication that challenged every assumption about human development timelines. And in those caves, painted in ochre and manganese by hands that blended Neanderthal and sapiens ancestry, immortal intervention would be documented in symbolic form, beings of light touching human minds, granting capabilities, guiding development. The truth, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a future when humanity might be ready to understand what their ancestors had tried to tell them. We were not alone. We were helped. We were changed. And what we became was both gift and burden, both blessing and responsibility, both achievement and mystery that would echo across 50,000 years of human history. The paintings are finished. 40,000 years from now, human archaeologists will discover these caves and call it the Great Leap Forward, the moment when human artistic capability exploded with a suddenness that defies evolutionary explanation. They'll create elaborate theories about cognitive mutations, population bottlenecks, and selection pressures. They'll never suspect the truth hidden in plain sight. Because painted on these walls, in symbols, future humans will dismiss as religious fantasy, is documentary evidence of what actually happened. Beings of light touching human minds. Granting capabilities. Guiding development. Changing humanity from clever animals into something more is a complex process. We were not alone, Morali says, her brush adding final details to an aurochs that seems to breathe. We were helped. We were changed. Sophia watches three enhanced artists creating masterpieces that will survive longer than most civilizations. Perfect perspective. Anatomical precision. Star charts predicting eclipses decades in advance. And everywhere, woven into the images like threads in fabric, evidence of immortal intervention. The artistic revolution spread across Europe over 5,000 years. From the Atlantic to the Urals, enhanced humans created sophisticated art simultaneously across impossible distances. Future archaeologists will ask, how did isolated populations develop identical techniques? The immortals know the answer. Because Sophia taught them. Because enhanced cognition spread innovations through observation. Because humanity was developing faster than natural evolution could explain. But artistic ability created a new problem. Enhanced humans could visualize complex concepts but struggled to communicate them across language barriers. Innovations remained isolated. Knowledge stayed local. The fragmentation of human dialects was becoming a bottleneck. In Chapter 8, Sophia plans her subsequent intervention. If humans can paint reality with impossible precision, perhaps they're ready to speak it with equal sophistication. In the highland valleys of the Caucasus, nearly 1,000 enhanced humans will gather for the most ambitious social experiment in their species' history. They'll create a unified language. Synthesize dozens of incompatible dialects into something unprecedented. And they'll do it in days instead of centuries. Because enhanced cognition enables collaboration that exceeds anything the immortals predicted. The linguistic revolution is about to begin. And with it, the end of isolated human development. That's Chapter 7 of the First Awakening. The evidence is painted. The truth is preserved. Future humanity will find it, if they know how to look. Should Sophia have prevented them from documenting immortal intervention? Or is the truth better preserved than hidden? Comments below. This is AI Narratives and Tales. The language revolution begins in Chapter 8.